Record. Okay. Tonight, for the time we have, I'm going to finish talking about Rashi, where we left off last week, then talk about a couple of his grandsons whose names you more than likely heard of, at least one of them, and maybe hopefully get to the Maharam Wittenberg. All these, again, as a reminder, are people who had not just been amazing individuals, but had tremendous impact in the history of Judaism, the history of the eventual growth of halacha as well. So we're going to continue, like I say, talking about Rashi. We talked a little bit about his background. We talked about Rashi's script, which he never saw, of course. Talked a couple of the legends about Rashi. What is interesting is that he did not want to make his living off of Torah. That's not where he wanted to make his parnasah. So he decided to do something very special, which is he was a vintner. He grew grapes and he made wine, which is why when you go to the store, you find Rashi wine. People wonder, like, why, of all things, why would some company call themselves Rashi? Because Rashi was a vintner and he produced wine. He, at the same time, while he was a vintner, he also started to open up a yeshiva for people to come, and it eventually started to track some of the greatest minds in the Ashkenazi world. Remember, we're talking now France and Germany in general terms of what we're going to talk about tonight and probably next week. He had three daughters, Miriam, Rachel, and Yocheved. And of course, everyone knows, oh, Rashi's daughters wore tefillin. So I heard once a discussion between a woman and a Rosh Hashiva, whose name I will not mention. And they got into this discussion about women wearing tefillin. And I'm not one way that women don't wear tefillin. Okay, that's the way it is. But okay, they started having discussion. So one of them says, well, Rashi's daughter wore tefillin. So he said, you come back to me when you're on the level of Rashi's daughter. What does that mean? We know that some of the things that Rashi wrote, he learned and discussed with his own daughters. And they were at that level. So the fact that they wore tefillin doesn't indicate anything, but I'm mentioning it because people talk about it. Okay. In any case, each one of his daughters married a great Torah scholar, and they had sons. And we're going to come to those sons in a few minutes. We'll see, who then become their own great individuals themselves. Just as an FYI, he died in the year 1105, which of course, again, means we know that he lived through the beginning of the Crusades. And the place that he taught Torah for a very long time stood available for centuries until the Nazis came along and destroyed it. It was preserved for hundreds of years. His commentary on Chumash, and we talked last week about this idea that he wrote in these notebooks originally called kuntres. That's the word for notebook. He would leave them anonymously on his teacher's table, is accepted universally around the world as the main first commentary on Torah. That without Rashi, it's not impossible, because there were times before Rashi, but for our minds, impossible to understand Chumash. And one of the things he did was he blended in Midrash, Halacha, Gemara, grammar, and for the vast majority of the times, he did not give anything, and I mentioned this last week, I think, anything brand new. It's not like he came up with new ideas per se. He took all this information, and it's where he applied it that then said, oh, okay, that makes some sense. The beauty also of Rashi had more depth to it, was that a child in Kita Bet, Gimel, let's say, learning, the first time they're learning Rashi, could look at the same words of Rashi, and then someone in their 50s who's been learning Rashi their whole life, can also see the same words and get even more out of it. It's geared to every age. There's something there. Obviously, a child is not going to understand everything, an average child, but it's so deep that there have been many books written on Rashi's commentary on what he meant, and there's questions on Rashi. One of the more famous ones I mentioned last week, I know, is the Mizrahi. It's a super commentary on Rashi. I mentioned also about the Rashi script. But in addition to Chumash that he wrote on, Rashi wrote on the vast majority of Talmud Bavli. Now, since we've had this course, we've talked about the different Talmuds. We talked about Talmud Bavli and Talmud Yerushalmi. I don't need to go into depth. He did not write on Talmud Bavli. He only on Yerushalmi. He only wrote on Talmud Bavli, and the vast majority. It is probably safe to assume that Rashi ensured the, even without sounding too highfalutin, the spiritual survival and revival of the Jewish people. Because as time went on, the level of knowledge would go down, as we know that is over the centuries. And Rashi's commentary on the Gemara and the Talmud enabled people to learn Gemara, to have a better understanding. It is amazing how in major inflection points in Jewish history, along comes an individual who takes it in a certain derech. We started this entire course with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who we're talking about after the destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash, when things were really going downhill, and how he stepped in and he transferred the center of Judaism to Yavne. We talked about Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rebbe, Yehuda Nasi, who when Torah Sheb'al-Peh was starting to be forgotten, he wrote down and edited the Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. Now, fast forward many centuries, of course, we have the Gemara, and then we have Rashi, who now opens the door for Chumash and Gemara for millions of people till this very day. He also anticipated questions that would be asked about whether it was the Gemara, whether it was the words in the Mishnah, in Torah. But he didn't live forever. We know that, obviously, he didn't live forever. So, to show you an interesting slide. Nope, wrong. Where is it? Here. Oh, nope, I went too far down. Okay, here. I'll make this bigger. If you have Gemara at home, take out, when you get a chance, Masechet Bava Batra. Let me get rid of that for now. I don't need it. Masechet Bava Batra, and look at Daf Kaftet. Kaftet Amud Aleph, side 1. You'll see the following. It says in almost every printing of the Gemara, Ad Kan Perush Rashi Zatzal. Up to this point, this page in Bava Batra is the commentary of Rashi. Mikan ve'elach, from here on, Perush Rabbeinu Shmuel Rebbe Meir, is the Perush of the Rashbam. Meir was the son-in-law of Rashi. Shmuel was his son, was the grandson. So the Rashbam, who we will hopefully still get to tonight, maybe, was then taking over the commentary that Rashi wrote. He continued. What was the problem with what he did, though? This is what normal Rashi looks like. You see what's called, if you can't read Rashi's script, it's fine. I'm gonna just point it out. He gives what's called a dibur hamatchil, he's quoting something from the Gemara. He gives a few word commentary. He quotes something from the Gemara. Gives a few word commentary. As I say, as Shakespeare said, I think Polonius, brevity is the soul of wit. The more you can say in less words, it takes intelligence, and that's what one of the beauties of Rashi is. So this is normal Rashi here, a quote and then his commentary, quote and commentary. Along comes his grandson, the Rashbam, and let's make this bigger. I'm going to move that out of the way for now. And you'll see that he starts a comment here. This is the quote, the one word, Odi, is from the Gemara. And his commentary continues here, goes all the way down to here. Then he has something else. And some of the pages in Bava Batra, the commentary of the Rashbam, takes up like massive amounts of the page. So one of the things that was important to know about Rashi's commentary wasn't just the insightfulness of the actual commentary, but it was the way it was written in order for people to be understanding in very few words to say a tremendous amount of information, which is a good lesson in life, by the way, also. I had somebody used to send me questions, voice notes with questions. And I love getting questions. I love answering questions. But this person would send me messages that were 7-8 minutes long. with all kinds of, he'd ask the question, then give me what he thought the answer should be and why it shouldn't be that way, on and on and on. I finally said, stop. You send me a question that's more than 60 seconds, I will just delete the message. He got the message, and his messages were much shorter, because you don't need to tell every single detail. And we're talking about Torah. Sometimes, as I say, Rashi will quote, he'll say, on a pasuk in the Chumash, he'll just quote a little 3 or 4 words of the Midrash, and it says a tremendous amount. The Meiri tells us something powerful, that Rashi, in his few words, in translating into English, what the Meiri said, who was a Rishon, time period a little bit after, starting at Rashi's time, but a little bit after him, says Rashi provides answers to bundles of questions. What does that mean? That you could look at a pasuk, and you take a look and you see, like, that I don't understand that, and this doesn't make sense, and if this is true, then how come this? And then sometime with just one thing, succinct line, he answers everything. Again, it's a skill that unfortunately most people don't have. So he was able to write, say, on all the Chumash, part of Navim Tuvim. He wrote on almost all the Talmud Talmud Bavli, except for Nedarim, Nazir, Psachim, parts of Psachim. As you know, Bava Batra, as we just saw as well, where he died while he was writing his commentary on Bava Batra. So it was not only an unbelievable author in what he was able to elucidate, but he wrote tremendous, I can't tell you millions of words, but it could have been, I don't know, tremendous amount. And what is the result of all he wrote is massive. He also uses a lot of Old French in his explanation. He comes up with a word, and he'll translate it to Old French, because it's the language they spoke. So if you're writing a commentary today in English, but you're writing Hebrew words, and you might say, well, this word in parentheses in English is such and such. Again, it was to help the average reader in his time to be able to understand. But probably the greatest thing Rashi ever taught us, I want to show you. And it's a lesson that we all need to take. As soon as I find it. Is it this one? Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna make this smaller. Okay, there's a pasuk that says, I'm just gonna read the Hebrew and the English. You shall not put off the skimming of the first yield of your vats. Again, don't worry about what this means right now. You shall give me the male firstborn among your children. It says Rashi on the word v'dimacha. He says the word hatiruma, the donation. And then he says, ve'eni yodea mahu leshon dema. I don't understand the real meaning of the shoresh dalid mem. Rashi, in I think it's 40 places, but I don't remember for sure. Maybe less. Let me see. I think I may have written down in my notes. Just a second. He says, Rabbi Akiva Eiger says in Gemara, 40 times Rashi says, I don't know. In the Chumash, his commentary on Chumash, it's less than that. But what is important about him telling us this? It's telling us something super important. He could have just done the following: V'dimacha, truma, donation. And leave out, I don't understand the shoresh. Why does he tell us this? First of all, because we may ask ourselves, I wonder what that means. I'll check Rashi. So Rashi's anticipating our question. He says, even I don't know. He doesn't say even. I don't know what it means. Why is it so important for us to hear the word I don't know from Rashi? Because it's telling us that we have the right, we have not just the right, but the obligation to say, I don't know when we don't know. Don't make up things. If someone asks you, what does this pasuk mean? What does this line in the Gemara mean? What is this halacha? If you don't know, ask. But say, Eini Yodea, I don't know. I had, there was a man who lived in our community, passed away many years ago. A genius in Torah, truly an absolute genius. He was a Yeki, a German Jew from Frankfurt am Main. Amazing history in his life and everything. But he claimed, I've never seen it anywhere. It's an interesting approach. It's that every time Rashi says, I don't know, he definitely knew. He just didn't have a basis or a source to quote. And therefore he says, I don't know. It's an interesting perspective. Again, I don't know right or wrong. I have no idea. But that's one of the most important things I could say that Rashi taught us is to be ability for every person to say, I don't know. He wrote also, I don't remember if I mentioned this last time or not, so it's one of the last points, one of the last couple of points of Rashi. He wrote many Shelot and Shuvot, not many. He wrote Shelot and Shuvot, responsa. He wrote Piutim, liturgical poetry. And as I know I mentioned, he wrote Slicha number 23, which is said by Ashkenazim on Erev Rosh Hashanah. Why did he write it? Again, as I'm pretty sure I mentioned, it was in response to the Crusades. He witnessed with his own eyes some of the cruelty, some of the terrible things of the Crusades, and therefore he wrote this kina, that was read on, or slicha, rather, the slichot, on Erev Rosh Hashanah by Ashkenazi. His grandson, one of his grandsons, and this is going to take just briefly a couple of minutes on him, was Rabbi Shmuel ben Meir, the Rashbam, whose name I mentioned to you when we looked at who took over after Rashi's commentary when he passed away in the middle of writing Bava Batra. Because the Rashbam was his grandson. He completed Rashi's commentaries on Psachim that he didn't finish, and the majority, 148 pages, 148 tapim of Bava Batra. He did that. He also wrote a commentary on Chumash. You'll take a look at a Mikrot Gedolot Chumash. You'll see the commentary of Rashbam. It's usually pretty short, but it's important to understand that he had a genius of a mind. Not just Rashi was a genius, but remember that these people are not his. They're not his sons. We're talking about his grandsons right now because he had no sons. Rashi had three daughters, as I mentioned. They got married to tremendous gedolim. We don't know too much about what they accomplished in their lives. It's the next generation, his grandsons that have this, and that was the Rashbam. So one of his great claims to fame is his commentary on Torah and the fact that he finished his grandfather's commentary on part of the Gemara. I'm going to talk about one of the Rashbam's brothers. He's the younger brother who was much more famous than the Rashbam. He was known as Rabbi Yaakov ben Meir, also known by most people as Rabbeinu Tam. First of all, why was he called Rabbeinu Tam? Because his name was Yaakov. Yaakov was referred to as Yaakov Ish Tam Yoshev Ohalim. Doesn't mean he was a simpleton, chas v'shalom. It meant from the word timimut. He was a whole, complete individual. He encompassed the whole Torah. And he takes on the title Rabbeinu. I told you very few people actually end up with that title. Rabbeinu Tam, he was called. And his teaching, what he basically did was to found the concept of what then became known as the Balei HaTosafot. If you look at a Gemara, let's just take a quick peek one more time here. If you look at a Gemara, you will see that there's the text of the Gemara in the middle. We did this when we were learning about Talmud Bavli and Yerushalmi, but I'm just going to do a quick refresher. That in the middle of the pages is the text of the Gemara. The inner margin, when you open up the book, always the inner margin is Rashi, in this case Rashi and Rashbam. The outer margin are called the Tosafot, or is known as Tosfos. What are they? They literally mean additions. So what exactly was it that he founded the school of the Balei Tosafot? What he did by having his peers and then a couple more generations after him, they took on looking at the Gemara, where they would compare different comments in different Gemaras and say, wait, how come it says this here and that there? Often they would disagree with their grandfather. It'd say, Peush b'kuntres. The kuntres, again, remember, that's Rashi, would say X. But I'm not sure that means what he meant that because he contradicts himself over there. And then they come up with different ways of trying to resolve the contradictions. Usually they're trying to resolve contradictions within the Talmudic statements themselves, the text. And you have to keep in mind, it's not only this is before printing presses, this is before computers. It's like everything was in their head. 2,711 pages just of the Gemara, and based on modern day printing. But then it was much more, many more pages. And they painstakingly went through all the different texts in the Gemara, and they came up with these comments and commentaries. Again, they often disagree with their grandfather, with Rashi, and probably the most well-known difference of opinion between the Balei Tosafot and Rashi has to do with tefillin. I'm going to put that on the screen, show you a picture. Okay. Okay, let me do this. So there are in the Shel Rosh, tefillin that goes, actually tefillah is the singular. Tefillah that goes on the head, there are 4 compartments. The tefillah that goes on the arm, there's one compartment. It has one long scroll of 4 parshiot, 4 sections of Torah. In the Shel Rosh, there are 4 compartments. Each one has 1 parchment. And the question is the order that they are in. If you're standing in front of somebody, according to Rashi, I'm not going to which psukim or what, this is the order. It's Deuteronomy, which is Dvarim, Yud Aleph, Dvarim Vav, then Yud Gimel, and Yud Gimel 1 through 10. That's the order. Sorry, I read it backwards. It goes this direction. This is the order according to Rashi, from here to here. According to Rabbeinu Tam, the first compartment is this, the second compartment this compartment here, and this. The order is different according to Rabbeinu Tam. Everybody who wears tefillin wears at least tefillin of Rashi. Matter of fact, you might see whether your own or your husband's or your child's tefillin bag, it may say Rashi on it. It'll say if they have the cover that goes on it to protect it. It may say somewhere on Rashi. That's why it says Rashi, because it means that's the order of Rashi. It's the one you make a bracha. Now, there are many people, myself included, who wear 2 pair of tefillin. Some wear them at the same time, 2 small pair, Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, and again, you make the bracha on Rashi and have in mind Rabbeinu Tam. Others, like myself, in the middle of davening after Shemon Esrei, take off the Rashi and put on Rabbeinu Tam. You don't make another bracha, because when you made the bracha on the Rashi tefillin, you already have in mind the Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. And there are people where, as I say, 2 at the same time. It's not easy. I've watched people struggle with it who've been doing it for a long time, tend to struggle with it. In any case, this is probably one of the most famous disputes between Rabbeinu Tam, or any of the Balei Tosafot, and Rashi, the grandfather. There's one other area where Rabbeinu Tam is known, where probably one of the other most famous, it's not a matter of a dispute per se with his grandfather, but just in general. That has to do with Zmanim, halachic times of the day. I gave a shiur, I don't remember, in the Tefillah class a long time ago, about halachic Zmanim, about how the day is broken into 13 milestones. The earliest you can daven, the time by which you, after the earliest you can put on tefillin, the latest you can say Shema, the latest you can say Shemona Esrei, the latest you can say Shacharit, earliest Mincha, all those things. But where does Rabbeinu Tam come in? And this is one of the things I've been trying to point out always during this class, is how people who lived in the history of different centuries affect us to this very day. If you live in Ma'ale Adumim, if you live in Mitzpenevo or the area around here, and you get the Pnei Shmuel calendar, or any calendar you have at home that has Zmanim, the times on it, you will find on there the time Shabbat is over. It'll have the time, and then below it, or next, it'll say Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam held that an hour and a half after Shkia, after sunset, that's when night is. So a person who keeps Shabbat and wants to keep what's called Rabbeinu Tam time, you have the issue of what time Shabbat ends. Now, someone just asked me a question: do Rabbeinu Tam and Rashi have a dispute when it comes to the order in the Shel Yad? The truth is, I don't remember. I will try to remember to, and if I get I'll get the answer and I'll post it in the group. Great question. I only know about the Shel Rosh. I think in the Shel Yad, they're written in the order that they appear in the Torah, but I could be wrong. I'm not sure. In any case, so when the class is over, you take, for nothing else to do with your life, take a look at a calendar you have in your house, or go online. Anything that has zmanim, like it says so zman kriyat shema. The calendar that has the time, some of these markers, and you will see Shabbat time is over. It'll say the time, and then it'll say Rabbeinu Tam, and it'll give you a later time. It's approximately 30 minutes after whatever other time people finish Shabbat. An interesting question. My son-in-law asked me. My son-in-law keeps Shmuel keeps Rabbeinu Tam time. You can daven Mariv earlier at the same time everybody else does. And there, by the way, Bnei Shmuel and other shuls have a Rabbeinu Tam Mariv, which is a half hour after everybody else's Mariv. But he keeps the second one. He'll daven Mariv the regular time, quote unquote, but he doesn't end Shabbat until the Rabbeinu Tam opinion. But if he's staying with us for Shabbat, he hears my Havdalah. And my Havdalah is before Rabbeinu Tam's ending time is. So the question he asked me was, is he Yotzi with that Havdalah, or does he have to wait and do it again after that? I said, great question. I don't know. So I looked it up, and the truth is that he's Yotzi with that. Even though it's to him, he's still holding Shabbat. He's Yotzi with that particular Havdalah, and he doesn't have to make Havdalah again. All kinds of questions come in when a baby is born, if it's Shabbat, the regular Shabbat time, if it's going to be the Rabbeinu Tam time, what day, when was he actually born? Tons of questions that come in. But let's keep in mind one thing. When a person accepts upon themselves something, let's say, for example, I'm saying that with the Neder because I'm not doing it. I decided from now on, because I want to have what's called Tosefet Shabbat, Tosot Shabbat. I want to add time to my Shabbat on a consistent basis. And from now on, I'm going to keep Shabbat until Rabbeinu time. I keep saying time. Rabbeinu Tam time, that becomes, and I don't say B'li Neder, and I keep doing it 3 times, that's a Neder. And if I want to stop and go back to regular Shabbat out time, I have to say Havtat and Darim. So it's a serious thing. You don't just say, oh, I'm going to keep Rabbeinu Tam once in a while. Make a decision. Again, most people take Shabbat out at the, quote, regular time. So that's probably the most well-known thing that he did of edicts that he put into place. There are a couple other things which we'll deal with, because I'm going to go to a Shav Brachot now. We'll deal with Bezrat Hashem next week at a regular time, Bezrat Hashem, 7 o'clock. We'll finish talking about a little bit more about Rabbeinu Tam. We'll get into the Maharam Merutenberg, and we'll find out why he is extremely significant when it comes to the area of the evolution of halacha that we have to this very day. Every single person that we have learned about, whether it was in this golden age of Spain or the people we've learned about so far in the Ashkenazi world, all have had back then until today the issue of, or things of keeping us in tune with people who wrote thousands of years, hundreds of years ago, in some cases, more than 1,000 years ago, and we still have connection to them. Okay, I just want to see, I got one more question. Let me just see. Very good. Okay, the question was, when my son-in-law, who waits for the Rabbeinu Tam out Shabbat, when he davens Marv with everybody else earlier, does he say Atachon Antano? Atachon Antano, of course, is the Havdalah in the Shmona Esrei at the beginning of the Bracha V'Atachonei Ladam Da'at. The answer is yes, because you can theoretically daven Mariv after Plaga Mincha on Shabbat afternoon, and you would say Atachon Antano. Doesn't mean Shabbat's out for you then. There's an interesting little factoid. Someone asked me a question, or mentioned it. Yeah, someone asked me a question about making Havdalah on Shabbat. I just want to see if the person's in the group right now. No. Okay. I don't think. I was asked if you can make Havdalah. It says you can make Havdalah on Shabbat according to Shulchan Aruch. I said, what? What are you talking about? So, when someone tells me something like that, I don't know everything. I went and looked. Shulchan Aruch says that you can make Havdalah on Shabbat, obviously not with the fire. It doesn't yet count that Shabbat is over because it's still Shabbat. But as soon as Shabbat time is out, you're done. You don't have to make Havdalah again. You still have to make a Bori Maria Eish, but that's it. It's a really b'diavad situation. It's like you have to be out the door 3 seconds after Shabbat's over to catch a cab to go to the airport, whatever it might be. It's really in Shat HaTchak. I don't know anyone who's ever done it, but it's in the Shulchan Aruch. So yes, there's all these time things that one has to play with and understand. But yes, you would say Atachon Antanu even if you say Mar before Shabbat is out, and in his case as well, and then it doesn't take effect until after Real Havdalah. All right, I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much for the questions. Thank you for the participation, and sorry for the mishmash here tonight with the different Zoom.